Just the capacity of the Nebraska State Penitentiary is about 180%. So you can't do any rehabilitation there, and just trying to raise awareness, make sure that people know about it, because the guys that are in there are not getting any help of any significance, and they get out without a lot of help, and that's all I'm trying to do, is just raise awareness about that.
Give them a hand. All right. Now, in case you haven't been, Paul Feldman. In case you haven't been to one of these before, Willie Hamilton.
No, sir.
Okay. Willie Hamilton knows how this thing goes. I'm the host, and I talk for about 45 minutes, and then we bring the real guest on for about 3 or 4 minutes. So we're going to begin right now. So welcome, officially welcome all of you to this town hall meeting where we have former president of the city council, Mr. Ben Gray. Give him a hand. You still the president, chair of, and the current president or chair of the Douglas County Commission, Mr. Chris Rogers. Give him a hand. I do want to acknowledge if there are any candidates running for office, make yourself known. Go ahead and just tell everybody, or you can use the mic. Come get it, however. He's going to be a tough candidate. He's got a boot on. He's kicking his candidate.
My name is Terrell McKinney. I'm running for state legislature here in District 11. My campaign kickoff will be this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Love and Jazz Center down the street. So you could come, bring your family and friends also. I look forward to meeting all of you.
And then, let's see, let me find the oldest man in the room. Oh yeah, Dennis. Come on over, Dennis, and let us know.
Yeah, my name is Dennis Womack, and I'm going to be a candidate for legislative seat 11 in Senator Chambers' seat. I retired from the U.S. Department of Labor in order to take on that venture, because we need a lot of things in this city, and it doesn't begin with just economic development without jobs. Jobs become first. We have to find a way to retain and keep an economic base within this community. And through my experience, I believe I can bring back workforce programs that are instrumental in our community. So look for me. I will have my kickoff next Wednesday. Thank you very much.
And I guess that's all the candidates.
Ricky Smith, Omaha Public School Board, District 1. I'll be running again.
Let me just take a somber moment, and Brenda, I kind of putting you on the spot, but it may be a rumor, and I hope it is, that Fred Conley was in the hospital. Anybody have that? Okay, don't want to mess with that. And so, my job is to introduce the key guest, but Willie Barney, could you come? I just want you to introduce the Revive Center. How many of you are here for the very first time? So, when he has a chance, you all can let him talk anytime you want to. And I do, again, I'm not trying to hog up all of the agenda, but I will. How are you able to be here, Carl? You're so old and your hair is not gray. I don't understand how that works. So, a representative to just brief everyone on this new, great, wonderful enterprise right here on 24th and Lebanon.
We opened the Revive Center this summer, and it's basically almost like a spin-off, an event center and a physical location from our magazine, Revive Omaha Magazine, which we still publish that as well. But the center, we've used it, we are doing events here. So some of the faces I've seen in here, you've been here on the first weekend of every month when we've opened for lunch. On that Saturday, we had some African-American vendors in here, as well as on Sunday, we do our gospel brunch. So we hope to see you maybe in November, that first weekend. But we also lease the space, as you are in here tonight, to other organizations and companies to use the space as well. So we hope that you guys have a good time tonight. Thank you all for coming out. We appreciate you again having your town hall here as well.
24th Street is coming back. It's coming back. It's coming back. I'm going to go ahead and introduce, but as I do, I surely want to pause. There are so many of my generation and some of yours who have passed away just in the last week. And I don't even want to try to list the names, but I know Bobby Davis was buried yesterday. There's Mary Boozer. Y'all help me with some of the others. David Gill, Skeets, Mann, and so many others have passed away. So I hope that we should all give them love and prayers. So I would hope, as we introduce the candidates, that you understand this is an open forum, meaning that there is no subject in particular. We're going to ask both of these elected officials to just make a few personal comments on whatever they want to say, and then throw it open so we can have an open dialogue on whatever subject you want to talk about. I would hope that someone maybe would take a minute, either from the audience or from you all, and talk about the importance of the census that we get counted. So I'm not going to do my speech on it, but I surely hope that we talk about it. With that, let me first, let's go with the tallest one. Let's give Commissioner Chris Rogers a hand and respect.
Thank you, President, and thank you all for coming out. To this initial point, let me know, I'll also be up for re-election. I'd like to ask for your continued support this year. I'm going first because in local government circles, Ben and a few other people, Ricky to some extent, school boards, they get this stuff that, some of the sexy stuff that makes people really get mad, ticked, and I'm concerned. For instance, the streets, the police, the parks, that's the sexy government stuff. So Ben will go last to some degree. I'll give you some updates, some of the things going on in the county. I'll start with the lower issues that you may have heard about that I want to give you some clarity on. How many of you all have heard of the issue going on with the election commissioner and the rules about the attorney general and the election commissioners in 3 counties? Okay, and he's a former election commissioner. There was a request by Senator Hansen and then also Senator Moorfield to ask for clarification on the election commissioners around the state. Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster, which are the 3 biggest counties, are the only 3 counties in the state where the election commissioner is appointed by the governor. Whoever wins the governorship, likely it will be a person of that party, and then the deputy is chosen from another party. Usually it's a Democrat. If it's election commissioner is a Republican, usually it's a Democrat and vice versa. Attorney General did a ruling, and the Attorney General says that the election commissioner's offices are county offices, and those offices should be elected and not appointed. So right now, I don't know what the legislature will do in some respects, but they're in a mode of limbo because there's this language tweak in the law that basically says it has to be, the election commissioner has to be appointed. If it's not appointed, the election commissioner that there stays until one is duly appointed. So if you hear something going on in that respect, our current election commissioner will likely stay in until they get this resolved. I don't know if the legislature is going to do something statutorily or not, but depending on where this goes, there could be another countywide elected office, and they could not be that names on the legislature to make a change. Other thing I just want to make you all aware of, there's a turn back tax grant out there. Some of you all have applied for in the past. Turn back tax is an initiative put in a while ago that there's money steered towards the continuous census tracts of poverty in North and South Omaha. There's a certain amount of money that is turned back off the bonds from the CHI Center. That money is split between North and South Omaha, and that money is then redistributed specifically to bring tourist attractions back into North and South Omaha with a specific clause where some of the money can be used for gang intervention and violence. That app's out there. The deadline for it is on the county's websites and the city's website, and I think the deadline for it is next week if anybody's interested. Also, another application out there is called community-based aid. Community-based aid is a pot of money from the state that's been divided up by population to the counties around the state. Douglas County is about 1.7 million of that. Every year we have to go through an application process, and that money is used by agencies to prevent kids from going to detention. That grant is out there. Let me note to you, it is a very prescribed grant, meaning that if you take on that grant, you take on a lot of burden from the state to do some reporting. The county goes through the process of distributing it and putting it out, but note that that is out there right now. You can apply for that, and the group that governs that and makes the decision on that will probably be meeting on that sometime in December. Also, I want to lastly just put you up on the first Tuesday of November. The county's going to have a presentation in general on its criminal justice system and the costs. And the presentation is more so as to make the public aware and to start setting the stage, to just make everybody aware of the cost in the budget that's geared and is growing toward criminal justice. For years we've been working on it, but legislative changes over the years, situational changes, has put it to the point where we want to bring it to the public's attention, because every year criminal justice eats up a greater amount of the county's budget. For those that may not know, other than the local police departments, every other aspect of the criminal justice system is under the county's realm. Our jail makes up probably about 25-30% of that budget. If you make comparisons to the federal government, the county jail is the Department of Defense. It eats up a lot of money, salaries, things of that sort, and just the containment, and the fact that every year the health costs increase because 60% of the people in there are mentally ill. And so Douglas County Jail and any county jail in any urban center and across the country has become the largest mental health institutions across the country. I want to bring that to the public's attention because for a while we've been trying to work with the state to try to up the mental health capacity of providers and everything around the state to get people out that don't need to be in there deteriorating. Also, we've been trying to consistently work with the state and been supportive of some bills that are there to reform pretrial and money bail. Right now we have about 900 people that are in our jail on pretrial, and I know all of those people aren't in there are serious risks, so we were trying to work on some pretrial programs and other things to that degree. And obviously you have the cost of services that grow with the juvenile. And so with that, that'll be on the first board meeting in November on the first Tuesday. I encourage you all to see that and see what the cost is, what the growth is, what we're trying to do to curtail that. And I'll be free to answer any other questions you got. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Y'all can clap for Chris. All right, we got a lot of stuff to try and get to today, but one of the things that has been a real heavy set of...
When are we going to be able to ask them questions?
Can we finish this first and then ask questions, or do you want to take questions now? You can take questions now.
Why, as the coordinator of the DMC program, I found it necessary to file agreements to the county based upon your activity and another commissioner's not allowing him to operate his program the way it was outlined in his contract?
One, it's personnel issue, so I can't get deep into it. There's a grievance filed, but it's not to do with not letting him do his job. That's nowhere close to it.
It wasn't stated in there that you also wanted to try to and alter his job description?
No?
Any other questions? There are a couple of things I wanted to address today before, I took any questions. And I know we're going to talk about the 2020 census. I'm going to get to that. But prior to doing that, there have been a lot of concerns from a number of neighborhood associations in my district, especially Concord Square, Conestoga Place, the Riverfront community, and others, about the problem with homelessness in our community, and the number of homeless that people are starting to find not only in parks and on park benches and other things like that. They're starting to find them in their backyards. They're starting to find them on their back porches. They're starting to find them in places that they shouldn't be. And recently there was a town hall meeting that was held by the mayor, and the issue of this came up. And I wanted to take the opportunity because I think there was some misunderstandings or some misstatements. I'm not sure which because I wasn't there. So I'm not going to apply any blame or anything to anybody. I just want to make sure that we get the facts out. So I invited Linda and Barr from Sienna Francis House to come up and talk about what the plan is for Sienna Francis House going forward. Linda, thank you for coming in. If you give her your attention and applause, please.
So I grew up in a very large family, and I'm a loud talker, so I'm going to try to hold this where you can hear me and not blow you out of the room. Okay? So I thank Ben for having us. I get a lot of calls from the neighbors, and when I get those, there's part of me that really holds my breath. But I've been really holding my breath because Chris Rogers is going to sit behind me with a piece of paper and write. So I thank Ben for the opportunity to talk about the Sienna Francis House. I know that homeless people are not always the best neighbors. They do some things in the neighborhood that cause a lot of problems. We're here to provide a service to the homeless, to provide them somewhere to stay, clothes, shower facilities, services to move them out of homelessness. Some of the things that are going on are caused by people who do stay with us, we will say that, but some of them are not. So we want to kind of talk about what can we all do together, because we can't fence people in, we can't hold them on our campus and not let them out. There are many freedoms they get. We have this conversation with the police all the time. So we want to talk about those issues and try to problem solve together what are some of the best ways to approach them. But we also want to talk about what's going on the campus, because there is a lot of information out there that may not be correct. So I don't know where the slide turner is. So I want to talk about how many of you know that we're building a new shelter on the campus. So a few of you. So right now we are in construction of a new shelter, and this is why. We have 220 beds at the Sienna Francis House that are fixed beds that we can put people in. We have an average of about 300 to 350 men who come to stay with us every night. So those that don't get a bed, they are sleeping on a mat on the floor. So if this were the dining room at Sienna Francis House, we would move these tables out every night, and we would line you up in mats, and you would literally get a couple feet to sleep. This has been the reality there since 2005. I have not been there quite 2 years now, and we have operated like this the entire 2 years. So in 2005, the new shelter was built. It was named the Bay Ray building on our campus, and it's been operating at overflow ever since. So when the new shelter was designed and the number of beds were determined, it was based on how many people we are serving on average a night. It wasn't expanded. It wasn't built to bring more people into the facility. It was built based on that number. So our current women's shelter has 40 beds. So we do the same thing. We put women on mats in conference rooms. We put women on mats in rooms that are not meant to be dorms or sleeping rooms. Right now we're averaging about 90 to 95 women a night. So the new shelter will have 100 beds for women. We have seen an increase in women over the past year. I do want to share that. So we're seeing more women that are homeless. With the new shelter, we have been committed, and we've been talking about this with our other shelter partners, the other agencies that do homeless work. We will not be operating in overflow anymore. So when we open the new shelter in December, if you are not in a bed, we're going to work to get you to a different shelter and things like that, but we're not going to operate in overflow anymore. So the reason I share that is because I think there's just some concerns that we kicked people out during the day. When I arrived at the Sienna Francis House in January of 2018, we did kick people out during the day. We said, if you are here, you have to leave between the hours of 8 and 3, and then you can come back. We no longer do that, and we are no longer going to do that when the shelter opens. So there's plenty of space, much like the space that we're in now, during the day, that people can be there. The other piece of that space is it's designed to put services, our case managers, other homeless service providers, and B&A, all kinds of people in the middle of that space. So if somebody needs to see somebody to get services to get out of the shelter, those services are going to be there and available. We've been working a lot in the past 18 months that everybody who's there should have a housing plan. You just can't be there and be there. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to share this. When I got there were people who lived in the shelter many, many years, some of them like 19 years. We've been moving those folks along. Shelter is meant to be a temporary residence where you get a home. It's not meant for you to live there forever. Although there's a lot of work to be done there, we're really trying to work with people. You're here only as long as you need to be. You need to have a housing plan. So we talked about all of those pieces there. So this is the layout of the new shelter on the next slide. That's the outside, which isn't that interesting. On December 11th, we'll get back to you about the time because we don't have this down. We'll have an open house. You're welcome to come in and see the shelter, take a tour, and look around. It's always a little better when you know what goes on in there and you've seen the space than to maybe draw conclusions. Next slide, please. So this is the actual layout of the shelter. So when we tell you how many it serves and what you're looking at here, on the bottom of the screen is the men's shelter dorms. There's 350 beds. There's like a dorm A and a dorm B. So everybody will get a bed, they're bunk beds, they have storage there. The things next to them that you can see are like bathrooms, a laundry room where we hand out the bed rolls, things like that. A dining room that seats 175 people. We do serve about 430,000 meals annually at Sienna Francis House. We have a lot of folks who can't afford food and come in and just have a meal there. So it's sometimes not only people that are staying in the shelter. So you see kind of the dining room. That middle space there where you see the chairs and the seatings, that's kind of this area where people can be. Along next to that, you see offices where we're going to have the support folks. So the case managers, the other agencies, the supportive services are right in the middle, right next to them. The rest of it is kind of kitchen. The women's dorm is on what would be the northwest side of the building. So both shelters will be in the same building. And then those back two areas are storage. We get a lot of material assistance to help people, clothing, toilet paper, paper towels, and then the other one is food storage. So we'll leave this up so you can ask any questions, but we wanted to show this because it may feel like an expansion, but we're really not going to be serving any more people than we are today. It's designed to be that. Just to finish out, I should have probably provided a map of the campus. The current shelter, which is called the Bay Red Building, it will be rehabbed, and our chemical addiction program will move into that. I don't know how many of you know, we have an 80-bed chemical addiction program on our campus, so one of our missions is to help people in homelessness by becoming sober, putting alcohol and drugs, and getting back to work. So that's going to move into that Bay Red Building. Our original shelter on the campus, which we moved there in 1994, the Sienna Francis House, that will be torn down. There are no plans to put anything there. I know if you attended the mayor's town hall meeting, she talked about green space. We haven't got that far in the plans. It's really been more about getting this done and getting the Bay Shelter remodeled for the recovery program. Outside of that, we don't have any other plans for the campus. So I will take any questions if you have any.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Can you tell them about the outreach program that you've done? Because
Yes.
that's important to you guys.
Agreed, thank you. So we did apply to the mayor's social services grant funding cycle for an outreach person. We do think it's important to have staff who are going to go out in the community, pick up people, offer them a ride back to shelter, and to provide them some case management services. That position was funded, so we're going to start that position in January. That's when the funding starts for it, so we're going to be recruiting. So the idea is that if there's people in the park, there's people in the streets, that person will go out, make contact with them, offer them a ride to come back. We've had some success with that lately with the Parks Department and the Police Department. We've been working together where there's been some incidents on vacant lots in the parks, and the police have been clearing that out. We've been going and offering transportation back to the shelters, both Sienna Francis House and the Open Door Mission, and trying to coordinate services. So we're hoping that that outreach position will be the center of that coordination. So I think a couple of people have questions.
How much workforce development funding did you receive for that facility?
Workforce development funding, none.
Are you sure?
Positive. We are looking to add someone to our campus that would help our folks find jobs, and we just did receive a grant from a local bank for that, but we did not receive any workforce development funding. Do you have your hand up? Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
How many sex offenders do you have living at that facility? And is it true that you got $15 million?
That we have is it true that we got $15 million for the facility?
No. How many sex offenders
Yeah.
live there?
Yeah.
Is it true you guys got $15 million?
I didn't hear the second part of that.
Is it true you guys got $15 million to do that?
To take sex offenders?
What sex offenders?
We have received no funding to work with sex offenders. We do have sex offenders on our campus. I cannot tell you the exact number because it changes every day, but I will tell you we've been working with the state patrol about getting the sex offenders who are not staying at Sienna Francis House, their registered address changed. We have many sex offenders who go and register the Sienna Francis House, the 1702 Nicholas address as their official address, and then they do not stay with us. So we've been cooperating with the state patrol. They have a grant that is addressing that issue, and we've been turning over the names of people who are registering and not staying with us. But we do have sex offenders who live in our apartments on campus and in the shelter. We are one of the few agencies that offer shelter and housing to sex offenders, and I know that people may have strong feelings about that, but they have to have an opportunity to get back on their feet also.
My name is Cook County Attorney Bruce, and I'm a long-time resident of this area. And I want to know what is the data on the reason for the homelessness and for any increase in homelessness? Is it because of job loss, because of domestic violence, so on and so forth? Did you clarify that for me?
So that's really a loaded question. Some people would say that increase in homelessness is due to a lack of affordable housing, and that would go back to the 1980s when much federal legislation changed about affordable housing, and affordable housing units started to decline. We have seen a lot of market rate development of housing in Omaha for people who can afford market rate, but we have not seen a lot of housing development for folks who need affordable housing or have disabilities. At Sienna Francis House, about 40% of the people who check in to stay in the shelter with us are first-time homeless. So they may have just lost their job, get divorced, they don't have anywhere else to go, don't have the funds saved up. It could be that they're mentally ill and addicted. We have a lot of people on our campus who have mental health issues and substance abuse problems. So those are some of the things that cause homelessness. We know from studies that trauma in childhood and living in poverty are also risk factors for becoming homeless, being involved in jail. We work with county corrections quite a bit. People who come into our treatment program for substance abuse, some of them are coming out of jail into the treatment program. So those are all risk factors for homelessness. Our community, the level of homelessness has kind of stayed flat. It's not growing tremendously. What we do know about our community's data is that the number of people who are chronically homeless, meaning they've been homeless for a year or more, that has grown. From 2017 to 2018, that went up 12%. So what that tells me is that the people who are staying in the shelter, particularly those who are disabled and who need affordable housing and housing with rental subsidies, they stay in the shelter longer because those outlets to housing are not available. Okay.
So what's the process if you see someone that looks like they're camping out in a public space? What should you do?
That's a very good question. So there are some street outreach teams, which is a collaboration of several homeless agencies. We can get their number, they have flyers, and you can call them and they will go out and offer them rides, offer them ability to get out of that situation. You can also call the police. The police may go there and find that there's nothing illegal there, but this is a conversation we've been having a lot with the Northeast Precinct. And you can also call the mayor's hotline. And the mayor's hotline will get a hold of different agencies and people who may go out and try to move people along. I think through some of our discussions with the police, and I'm certainly not an expert on statutory legal issues, sometimes you can't force people off their property. It's not illegal for them to be there.
Have you guys working with developers, developing homes for homeless, who advise on homes for homeless instead of putting them in shelter?
Can I answer that? I won't answer it right now, I don't know if you work on it, but there are some things in the works about that, at least some discussion, and I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was about developing housing and what's being done to develop housing so people aren't being held in shelters and they actually have somewhere to go out to. Back there in the corner.
Question for you. I know you stated earlier that, I think you said starting 2018, they no longer had to leave the shelter from 8 to 3.
Yes.
So is there some type of programming that goes on? Because from my understanding, a lot of that was for them to engage in something outside of the shelter, so they are building but not staying there longer than that year. So is there programming going in that they're required to take while they're staying at the shelter during that time frame?
Do you want to repeat the first part of that? I'm not sure if everybody heard it, or I can.
Yep. So I know you stated in your note that the shelter prior to your arrival in 2018, individuals who stayed there had to leave the premises from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. So and we no longer do that, you stated. So since we no longer do that, is there programming that goes on that they're maybe mandatorily have to go to in order to stay in the shelter so that we are building them up to get out of the shelter? Because from my understanding, I thought the 8 to 3 p.m. was for them to go out and actually try to do something to get themselves out of the shelter. Like, hence, they might get a job, or they might go to these things or those things, or training, or whatever the case may be, to better themselves. So I don't know, when we take that away, is there any programming that we're pouring into them to improve the quality of their life and stuff?
Yes, there is programming that we're adding. One is we're trying to add more case management for people. So in order for some people to get to housing, they need assistance, and we don't feel like there's a readiness for housing. The faster that you can get back into housing, the less trauma you experience, and the better it is for you. So we try to make that all very individualized. We're also trying to increase those services. We offer some services during the day, community partners offer some services, and with new space, we're hoping to increase those services. Like I mentioned before, we've not had kind of a vocational presence on our campus, so we did just receive funding in the last 2 weeks to help us develop a vocational presence where we can get people. We work with the Salvation Army's work program that was funded by the mayor. They come to the Sienna Francis house and they pick up some of our guests and take them to the offsite jobs. So those are things that we've been working on. We're not as far along as we want to be, but also services are elective for people at this point, so we don't force anyone into services. So we're continuing to work on that piece. I think there were some more questions over here. Hey, Shelley.
How are you?
Good.
I just want to make a comment. I live on 21st and Charles, and I personally, with all due respect to you, I've seen this homeless situation get worse over the years. I have seen homeless people that's been staying in the Seattle Francis house for many years. It's almost like that's their permanent address. My question to you, if a person has a place to stay, eat, and they can run up and down the street, drink, and get high every day, what's the incentive to change?
Yes. So I agree with you, Shelley. I feel, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this. There's a personal responsibility factor about it. So one of the things that we've been doing to try to get that to change is when someone gets a housing opportunity, we work with our other community partners, many of them homeless agencies, to put people into housing. If they offer someone housing who's in the shelter and they decline it, we've basically been saying you're going to get an eviction notice. You can't stay here any longer. This is not meant to be a permanent residence. One of the things that we're discussing that we haven't implemented, because we also want kind of the other shelters to maybe implement it too, is kind of a verification, not a verification, but a voucher system where if you came in, you would get authorized so much time to be there. And if you're not working on a housing plan at the end of that time, we may ask you to leave. So that's not something that we've implemented, it's something that we're talking about. And if we start doing that, what would be the consequences of doing that? That's something we have to think out. So, if I offered Barb housing, and Barb said no, and we say, okay, Barb, you are not going to get evicted, which we've been doing, that makes people take their housing. I will tell you that. But if I start saying, now Barb, you've been here for 9 months, you're not working on a housing plan, I'm going to kick you out. We need to think through what might happen in those situations. Are they going to end up in the park or in the alley and create a bigger problem? So we're happy to have that discussion to involve you all in some of those decisions, but I think in order for us to do that, we want to make sure we've thought through it. Now, you and I have talked about, we are changing our curfew at Sienna Francis House. The curfew used to be 11 p.m. If you need a shelter bed, you need to be in bed before 11 p.m. And we need to know who's there. If not, we need to give it to someone who needs it. We raised that curfew up to 10 o'clock. Probably about a year ago, we're going to raise that up to 9 o'clock. We're hoping that that gets people out of the parks and the alleys and stuff. If I know I got to be there before 9 o'clock to get my bed and things like that, otherwise I'm not going to get in, then, we're trying to do little things. But we're also, as we're making those decisions, talking with you because we want to be really conscious of that might create a different problem.
My question is, if you don't make it mandatory for people to get into housing from the onset, you don't set that expectation, I hear a lot of, this is going to be the penalty, that's going to be the penalty, and those answers suffice the community at broad, but it really doesn't help the individual.
Yeah.
If you don't set that expectation when they come in, then you're not going to have that incentive because they are going to feel like, well, hey, I can just kind of hang out, I got some time. But if you set that expectation, so you kind of tripping your own self with not setting that expectation. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I agree. And I don't want to say that we're not setting that expectation. We require, if you've been there for 2 weeks, for you to meet with a case manager and have a housing assessment. And day one, the national research says 70% of people who come into shelter have a plan about ending their own homelessness, and most of them will not be there after 2 weeks, so you don't give them that intensive case management service on day one. If they haven't resolved in 2 weeks, that's when you do that assessment, because most people have an idea about what they want to do for housing, and a lot of them can pull it off. So that's kind of a resource management issue.
And I see the homelessness as well as Mr. Shepherd in that department. There is a big problem because there's a lot of kids. What are you doing to protect our community establishment or housing pedophiles
is we try to offer people services and a safe place to be. We can't dictate their actions when they leave on our campus, and we also can't keep them on the campus. When we find out that someone may be causing problems in the community, things like that, we try to sit down and talk with them about that and to come up with a plan for them to quit that behavior. So we also have been working with all of our residents about being a good neighbor. Like, you know, we use good neighbor campaigns on some of the message boards that we have. We tell people all the time, when you leave our property, it's your responsibility to be a good neighbor. Pick up after yourself. Don't harass people. We have several businesses around that will call us and say, hey, someone's here loitering. We often will send the staff over and offer them a ride back, or just try to engage with them, because we know that we feel a little more comfortable than someone else might approaching someone. So we're trying to do a lot in those cases, but on the other hand, we can't control an adult's behavior when they are on our campus or leave. That you're talking about, we also experience. If we have an assault taking place on our campus, we call 911, and we're not always happy with the response time. I just had a discussion yesterday with the Northeast Precinct, and they say they respond as quickly as they get the calls. They have no control, and maybe this is better for a county person than I, they have no control on when the call gets placed from dispatch to them, but when they get the call, they come out immediately and respond as timely as possible. Because when I hear those complaints from the neighbors, from people who call me, I take those up with the Northeast Precinct. And I just had this discussion again yesterday. It wasn't the first discussion, it wasn't the last discussion. And the response that I get back is, we go out on the call as soon as the call is, placed to us. And sometimes calls are on hold, sometimes they don't come through as exactly when the call is made. Now, I don't understand all that. I'm just kind of sharing information that I've been told about that concern, because there's sometimes something happens on our campus. We call and we wait a long time also.
We'll take one or two more questions. We got to move on. Okay.
If they're on file, the Chris would know this, and they're within 1,000 feet of the school,
It's not wrong.
and there's supposed to be some law that prevents that from occurring. And what does your agency do to, and Chris, you know there's a registry of sexual predators in this city.
But the county doesn't maintain.
Sheriff's Department does.
So they register with the Sheriff's Department, but the registry issue is a state law issue. I think that's what you're trying to say to us. And if you had a restraining order against me, the responsibility of that restraining order to keep is me, right? Like, I can come within 200 feet of you. So if I'm a sex offender and I have limitations to where I can be a school, a daycare, and things like that, that responsibility is to me. If someone is violating that and we know that they're a sex offender, we would call 911 and report that.
But you would also put an extra protection in there to make sure that you don't know it's being protected. And I just haven't heard about that, that's why I said that. But I mean,
Yeah.
you might want to work on that.
No, I think thank you for sharing that. One more, Ben.
Do you still maintain the monthly cost of prescription drugs that are ordered by the clientele and aren't picked up from front desk? And if so, is that average right now?
We do not do that any longer. So the prescription drugs that you're referring to were prescribed by Charles Drew and dropped off by Charles Drew. we no longer have that system in place. When someone's prescribed a medication, they have to go to the pharmacy and pick it up because we don't take their medications for them any longer. It wasn't the right thing to do, and we stopped doing it. So that would be a question that Charles Drew would have to answer. But we changed that system. We're now a medication dispenser. We're now a pharmacy, so that's something we no longer do.
Thank you, Linda, for coming down. Give Linda a hand. If I could say, let me back this up, mic off a little bit. If I could say one thing, if I could encourage you all to do one thing for Sienna Francis House and for the community in general, is when you see people on the corners or on the medians who are asking you for money and stuff like that, please try and not give them any money. Please send them to, because if you send them money, they'll never go to the places that they need to go to get help. So I would encourage all of you, and I know it's tempting sometimes, I mean, it's even tempting for me sometimes to want to give them $1. I don't give them any money. I'll take them and give them something to eat, but I'm not going to give them any money. But I would encourage you to not spend any money with them, not give them anything, but if they ask, just encourage them. There's Sienna Francis House, there's Open Door Mission, there's Lydia House, there are a number of other places that they can go. I would encourage you to not spend money with them or not give them any money. And if you're in a position where you can talk to them at all, encourage them to go to one of the shelters to start seeking help for some of the issues that Linda has talked about. Elijah, you got a question?
I have a question.
I'm going to get you your question real quick. There are a couple other things I want to say first, though. But I'll get you a question about affordable housing. Yes.
I have another question for Chris.
For Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Under the DNC program, there have been anywhere between 6 to 10 community meetings in different parts of North Omaha. And the main issue that has been presented at those meetings is that the ability for the community to get the types of services necessary, most of them centered around mental health issues and other kinds of things, they're not able to do that. And that seems to be the key point. What is it that the county is doing to better evaluate, serve, whatever those organizations, particularly those who are paid by the county to present those services, to work on this situation, because it's definitely a serious issue when the community's number one complaint is that they can't get the services to help their young kids.
Okay, let me separate that out. There's been 3 DMC forums, and DMC, or now it's called RED, Disproportionate Minority Contact, Racial and Ethnic Disparities in the System. There's been 3 of those meetings. The meetings that I went to, they didn't wholly focus on mental health services. The DMC issue calls is not specifically to mental health.
What about the ones that you attend in the community that dealt with DMC issues under race and community relations that weren't tagged or not sponsored by RED? I.e. the ones at Methodist Church.
I was at all of them.
Right. So there's more than 3.
They didn't talk specifically about mental health services. What that conversation was about programming and what would be available when the discussion was going on about the building and other things of that sort. Now, from a mental health perspective, today there's 78 kids at any time. There's probably somewhere between 20 to 15 kids that may be sitting in the detention center because there's not a next level of mental health services. Now, that is a state issue because the state handles all the capacity for mental health services around. So what we have done over the last year is we created a program with Creighton and UNFC's pediatric psychiatry program, Charles Drew and us, to 1, reduce the amount of time that a kid sits in there for psychiatric evaluations, and 2, to manage that kid outside the detention center instead of in the facility. So right now, the report I hear on that is that the evaluation time is speeded up, and the judges now trust the service enough to where instead of the kid waiting there in pre-adjudication, they're managed out by Drew and they're able to be seen by probation. So that's what's happened immediately. From my recollection of being there at the meetings, there was not a lot of discussion about mental health care because that's out of the county's control. That's a partnership with the state, and the state needs to work with us to increase capacity. What the biggest need is in the system right now is increased shelter beds and increased foster care. So the mental health is an underpinning thing, not just there, but in adult. But mental health is not pinned as the cause and the stress of DMC.
What about community services, period? I highlighted mental health because that's usually the end result. But there's a...
Okay, we're going to get to a couple other things too, but I got to do this one question and then we got to get some other things as well.
Does the state prevent you?
I answer the question. I identified mental health, but in all the situations, the people are talking about community services, period, not getting them. I've been to no meeting that organizations like Health and Human Services have even been at. This is a constant thing that services that the county pays for are not being handled as it applies to the needs in the community. Mental health is an outcome, but there are a lot of things in between that, and we won't be going to foster care.
Does the state prevent you from looking to the healthcare issue?
Hold on now, we're going one question at a time.
It's part of that.
One question at a time.
Does the state prevent you?
I said one question at a time, please. Please, we're going to be respectful of you. That's the one thing we're going to do. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, to your question, those kids they're referring to aren't paid for by the county. Those are the states. So, once you come to the court, you are seen and you're pre-adjudicated. And most of the time when you're pre-adjudicated, you can be put on probation. The issue with the system is you have to go deep in and get the services. So if there's a kid that has an issue getting mental health services, not the county that pays for it, it's the state that pays for it through probation. And again, the issue is that there's not the capacity or the services in the state to have adequate mental health services. And that's something that we've been working with the state for a while to increase that capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, all of the things that we're talking about are related to the decline of family. Single parent households, lack of marriage, children having children, and as long as we do not focus on who takes care of who, you know, it used to be the family took care of the grandparents when they got older, if they had a retarded person, auntie so-and-so took care of that. We have turned everything over to the state, city, whatever, to do the job that we should be doing. We should be encouraging young people not to have children that they cannot afford to have. We should be encouraging families to take care of their own individual person who might have some type of handicap, and it should be a beautiful thing. But if we turn against all these things, and so as long as we live like we live, we're going to have these same problems, and they're going to escalate as far as I can see.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for that. Let me get to a couple of other things real quickly before we take any more questions. There are a couple of things because you had a question that's been hanging for a while that I want to get to. But I want to talk first of all because Preston raised the issue. I'm going to stand close to Preston just in case I forget something. But the 2020 census is coming up, and the 2020 census comes up next year. And it is important for you all to get registered, to fill out the forms. It is important for you to get your families, your friends, and everybody you know to fill out that census form and turn it in. The reasons for that are numerous, but I'll mention just a few.
One, it determines your representation in state and federal government. It determines how many representatives you will get based on the numbers that are counted in the census and where those numbers are in relationship to this and other districts. The other thing is that when there are grant dollars, especially when you're talking about community development block grant dollars, those dollars are based on the census. They are based on how many people have registered, have signed up for the census, so that when we're talking about issues like we're talking about today, in terms of poverty, in terms of mental health, in terms of some of the other social issues that we all need to address, the 2020 census is critical, and it is important for us to make sure that we fill that out. There are also opportunities for enumerators, what we call enumerators. Am I right, Mr. President? We have enumerators who get paid, and I think they're paid, what, $18 an hour? I'm not sure about the price.
Between 13 and 17.
13 and 17. But see, these are what the enumerators do. The enumerators go out when, after the census data has been mailed to your home, if they don't get those documents back within a certain period of time, then they send out individuals that they call enumerators. And those enumerators are individuals who are paid to go door to door, to places, to homes where they have not received the packet of information about the census yet. And these enumerators try to help individuals get that done. And these enumerators are going to be speaking a number of different languages as well, but those jobs are going to be available starting, I think, in March. And they pay anywhere from, as Preston said, from $14 to $17 an hour. So people who might be looking for just some temporary employment, if for no other reason than to get involved in the census for that reason, please do it. But the census is a critical issue that needs to be taken care of. That is going to determine our representation. That's going to determine the dollars that we get, especially at the federal and state level. So please, please, please fill that out. Every time I have a town hall, every time I get a chance to mention it, for the next few months I'm going to be talking about the critically important issue of the census. And President, I guess you can apply online. Okay, you can join the 2020 census team and you can apply online. It's 2020census.gov/jobs.
Again, it's not just enumerators or canvassers.
Yeah.
But they will be looking for people to run the offices.
Yes.
Statewide.
Thank you for that. There will be offices, and you will be running offices statewide as well. But again, the 2020 census, if you want to join, if you have a computer and you want to join online, the email address is 2020census.gov/jobs. And I'll mention it again at some point in time if we get a chance before the day is over. But I did want to make sure that we talk about that. The other thing that I gotta share with you that is starting to be a heartbreaker for me. Property tax. And when people own property and you don't pay your property taxes, somebody's paying your property tax for you. Okay? In most instances, as Teresa Hunter, and thank you for being here from Family Housing, Teresa, I will point out, tax certificate holders buy a property, they will pay a property tax on a property that hasn't been paid. Here's the critical point. If you don't pay your property taxes for 3 years, and those 3 years, a tax certificate holder pays the property tax on your property, after that 3-year period, that property is no longer yours.